Before they kick off, though, I'm going to just make 3 observations, if you don't mind, about Peg Morris's work. I'm going to start off with the title of your exhibition itself, Light, Space and Time. There couldn't be almost anything more universal than that. Though I think that the work itself is extraordinarily particular, and I think it's really interesting to see those themes of light, space, and time come out of something which is so, in a way, English in the lineage of Nash or Ravilius, and whether that's expressed through those East Anglian salt marshes or London allotments. It seems to me that there's something very interesting about that relationship between those 3 universal themes and your very particular work. The second thing that I observed was about time itself, one of those things. And it seems as if the work is often about how time transforms things. It's about decay and rust and erosion, and there's always therefore a story behind it. And in a way, it's always a story, it seems to me, about people. But the third thing I wanted to say was that I noticed that there wasn't a single person, unless I've got it wrong, in any of the pictures. So although I feel that they're full of people, it's the evidence of people, and that evidence might be through decay, which is where people have been, and the effect that people have had, or sometimes it's about the promise or the possibility of people. And I see, in a sense, your doorways as being a kind of invitation to think about the people who have walked through there. So I'm going to hand over at that point to someone, Alison Lum, whose work has plenty of people in it. And I hope that in a way the conversation between these two can reveal something perhaps about the work that you will be prepared to say, Peg. So over to Alison.
Hi, it's absolutely delightful to be back in the One Paved Court community again, and I was thrilled to be invited to talk about Peg's work. I visited the exhibition last Saturday and enjoyed seeing it hugely, so it's lovely to get a chance to discuss it further than we did in the blog, Peg. I know that you want to talk a little bit about that title, and titles are very, first of all, perhaps you want to talk about some of those English artists that Paul has picked up on. I think you wanted to say a few words about that before talking specifically about your title and how that came about.
Yeah. So when I came up with the 3-word title at the beginning of 2020, I had no idea that our government would be bombarding us with 3-word slogans, stay at home, hands, face, space, and all of that. But it's probably best that I don't go down that route at all, because that's not what we're here for. And let's pretend that's all not happening. As Paul and Alison have said, I've always found it quite difficult to talk about my work. I think many artists feel like that. As a printmaker, I'm happy to talk about how I make the work, about the actual process involved in making an etching or a colograph or a lithograph or a painting. But if you ask me why or what it's about, that's where I start to struggle a bit. So, I've been reading a book recently called Unquiet Landscape by Christopher Neve, and it's about places and ideas in 20th century British painting, and it features artists, some of my favourites like Eric Ravilius and Paul Nash, John Nash, Graham Sutherland, Ivan Hitchens, who's my ultimate all-time painting hero, actually. And Neve, the author, describes how many of the artists he interviewed for the book were reluctant to discuss their work. And he said, on the whole, we talked about other things. There was a tacit agreement about that talking about something else was the best possible way of saying anything worthwhile about the paintings, without including them in the conversation directly. And then he said, I strongly believe that if you have anything to say at all about the pictures, that's the best way to do it. Though the best way of all, of course, is to remain silent, which I thought was quite appealing, but that's not really an option today. So that's why I asked Alison to join in and stop me lapsing into silence when I'm asked about my work. Yeah.
Well, yes, lapsing into silence isn't going to be an option, and I am going to push you a little. Don't worry. But so, yeah, sometimes, I've certainly found titles some of the most difficult things to come up with. So you have a 3-part title, so there must have been a number of areas that you felt were important to flag up. So could you expand on each of those a little?
Okay, so I mean, yeah, light, space, time it's about the essence of how I'm supposed to show a slide, sorry. I'm going to show you a slide now, and I'm going to do a bit of screen sharing because I thought it was important. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, good. Hurrah! Our technical run through was worthwhile then. Yeah, so light, space and time, it's about the essence of how I work and about the things that inspire me and the things that I long for. So light is the inspiration behind much of what I do, and particularly things like long shadows and the intense colours in the morning and late evening, and the patterns of light and shadows and how they move and how they change during the day, and how they change our perception of what we're looking at and the space that we're in, and particularly things like the pool of light, if there's sunlight coming through a window or through shutters, or the way that the colours are enhanced if you suddenly get a little burst of sunlight. Space is about the spaces that I'm interested in. I've drawn to empty, isolated or abandoned spaces, and what Paul was saying about there's no people in my work, but there's evidence of people, is absolutely spot on. I like to see the structures that people have created or the influence they've had on the landscape. But yeah, I do deliberately take out of all of my work. I have dabbled with life drawing and I enjoy that, but the people, none of my work features people. So that there might be the rust, the peeling paint, broken window, the crumbling stonework, the rotting boats, and that I've always, for a really long time, been fascinated about those things.
So this is terribly interesting, and this is where I'm just gonna, which isn't a psychotherapy session, it's a discussion of your art, but it's interesting me terribly that Paul picked up at exactly the same thing I picked up when I came and chatted with you at Q Print Studios for the blog we did. And it is this absence of people without the absence of the human presence, and your desire for a quiet place. And it's terribly interesting when you set that alongside the list of the artists that you like, because there's clearly a very strong strain of a kind of recognised English melancholy which runs through everything from those painters, Elgar, David Bowie, the clangers, the work of Oliver Postgate. That English melancholy is sort of thrumming below a lot of our culture, and yet you are a very busy and social artist, tutor, committee member, and a social and friendly person. So I can't help my curiosity is driving me back to this place of what is this about, and so far what you've done is restate the case that it is like that. Can you, without wanting go to any sensitive places, can you identify why that might be?
I wonder. I hadn't sort of thought. I was an only child, so I've always been very happy to be. I'm used to my own company. I'm used to being independent and self-reliant, and although I have learned to be much more sociable. I was very shy and reticent when I was younger, and I've overcome that. But I think I still need those times, those quiet spaces, and that time for reflection in order to be able to go out and be. People who've met me more recently don't think I'm being shy, but actually I am quite shy, really. And I've always loved abandoned places. There was a house in our road that I used to refer as a small child to as the lockdown house, and I always wanted to go and explore it, and I was never allowed. I think you can imagine the stories of what took place in those spaces, and there are clues, but you've got to let your imagination fill in the gaps.
So the solitariness of these places allows your imagination to play them, presumably.
Yeah. And the big open spaces that give you space to breathe and think, and and to imagine and reflect. And I'm hoping that that's kind of what I'm communicating in my work as well. I had a clear out recently in my studio after I lost an etching plate. Anyone who's ever looked on my Instagram will know about this. But in that clear out, I'm looking back through old sketchbooks, old photographs and so on, I realised that this doors and windows and rusty decaying things, that's been something that's interested me for a really long time, really, as long as I can remember, really. Sorry. Oh,
I wouldn't say anything, but I am looking at the slide you put of the absolutely stunning, I think it's watercolour sketchbook, Concertina one. It is really lovely. And the sketchbooks and the large charcoal drawings in your exhibition clearly demonstrate the fluid quality of your draftsmanship. And I know you draw a lot. So, and so can you talk a bit about what role drawing has in your practice specifically, and how, having done one of your drawing sessions, how do you decide to take that further? Which medium, what route to go down?
Okay, well, I'll move on to that next. There's another of the Concertina sketchbook. So the other thing I haven't mentioned is the time element of the title. I think I've always longed for more time to make, more time to reflect. And then suddenly at the beginning of lockdown, there was more time than I'd ever had in my life in the studio, and I went into the studio and I panicked and I just couldn't concentrate at all. And I found I found solace in going to outdoor places, so the allotments and the garden and the park. And these Concertina sketchbooks were what I did in that time, because those were spaces that felt normal, and that was a way of working through what was going on. And as you say, I have always drawn, and all of my work is rooted in drawing and observation, and even the more abstract stuff, it comes from drawing in the first place. And it's the sort of the nature of the drawing will then inform how I will then develop that image. So here's a sketch I did in Spain, in the Pyrenees, of the door, and that was quite closely observed, and it became then an etching, or otherwise they might become mezzotints. So the mezzotints that I've produced recently, here's some of the original drawings that I did in situ in the Ducal Palace in Sassuolo, and then you can see the resulting mezzotints, and because those were all about the light. And mezzotint, you start from dark and you burnish and scrape back and reveal the light in the image. So they very clearly, that from those drawings, I knew that they needed to be mezzotints, which are all about the light emerging from a dark starting point. Whereas some of my other sketches are much looser and freer, and these are the sort of the working ideas that became the monotypes that are in the window of the gallery. And I think, yes, there's one. So there's one of the monotypes, and there's another one. So they came from very loose sketches done in the salt marshes in North Norfolk.
Right. Yes. Now you talked us through it, you can see the equivalence and why one would suggest a certain route.
And I'm not very good at narrowing down to one particular thing. I really enjoy closely observed drawing, but I also really enjoy working more loosely and freely and using vivid colour. And I'll have sort of phases of doing one and then a phase of doing the other. And I have had people say, "Is it all the same person's work?" But yeah, it's just different aspects of how I like to work.
Quite a number of the images in the exhibition and in your work generally feature doorways and windows, and a glimpse of the space beyond. This is of particular interest to me with my interest in thresholds and liminal spaces, but I'm sure it intrigues others as well. So can you tell us a bit more what's going on in this imagery?
Yeah, I think when I think of a doorway, I think a doorway offers, or a window offers possibilities, so you can speculate about what's beyond, and you might be able to see it in the image, or you might have to imagine it. And this slide here is showing, on the left, there's a mezzotint by Peter Ilsted. I saw this mezzotint in Parent House Gallery in Chichester, and I was absolutely blown away by it. The skill involved in making that is astonishing. And he was the brother-in-law of Hammershoy, and that's one of Hammershoy's paintings there. And I love that, the quietness, although there is a figure in the mezzotint there, but Hammershoy's later work, he gradually takes out his figures as well. And I thought, I was really fascinated reading about him, and how he gradually took the people out, but you still know that they've been there, and it's a similar sort of feeling. I aspire to being able to paint dust motes in the sunlight like that, and they're astonishing. The book, oh, there's someone joining us, sorry, just let them. I was given a book about Hammershoy by Caspar Monrad, and he writes, by definition, a doorway offers you a choice, and I thought that really does, that sort of sums up what I'm trying to do, the sort of the looking through, and being drawn in. I want the person who's looking at my work, I want their eyes to be drawn in, to wonder what's beyond, and whether what they would find if they could go through that space. I've been working on a series of pictures featuring a word that Kate here taught me. I didn't know this word until she commented on something I'd posted. The architectural feature enfilade, which it turned out, oh, my internet connection is unstable. I hope you can all hear me.
You're a bit crackly, but just about okay.
Okay. So I've worked on a series of pictures with and images with the enfilade feature. So there's a charcoal drawing of this same place in Porto, and then there's an etching image and another painting of it. And I also, there's an artist I discovered on Instagram called Carlos San Man. I don't know if any of you have seen his work, and the way he captures the light in an interior is extraordinary. These are a couple of his paintings. So I would absolutely love to be able to do that, and that's what I'm aspiring to, working towards that. These are interior number 127 and interior 167. And again, he doesn't have people in his work either, so it's not just an English thing, because he's Spanish, and he also is interested in spaces where you can see clearly these are spaces that are occupied, but the people are not there at the moment. And this term enfilade, I'll move on. Oh, no, hang on. Oh gosh, I'll go back actually to there. It's a suite of rooms that are formally aligned with each other. And when you enter, you can see a vista going through a succession of rooms, and it comes from the French enfiler, to thread or to string things in a straight line. And it was really common in Baroque architecture, and the palace at Sassuolo, which features in several of the pieces in the exhibition, is a Baroque palace. And depending on your status, you would get further and further down through the enfilade, and if you were very important, you would reach the boudoir at the far end, but otherwise you might just only be allowed to stay in the very first rooms. Okay, let's go forward. So these drawings, the left-hand one is a sketch that I did in the Ducal Palace in Sassuolo, which is near Modena in northern Italy. And it was an overwhelming interior. Every single inch of every wall was covered in painting and trompe-l'oeil and so on. And it was so overwhelming that I ignored all of that completely and just looked at the light on the floor and coming through the shutters. But I just couldn't cope with all that decor and all those cupids and cherubs and gods smiting things, and so it was all just overwhelming. So I was much more interested in the structure of the building, which was quite confusing because of all this trompe-l'oeil. But then I went on to do a series of larger scale charcoal drawings, which you can see in the gallery, and this is one of them here, which were about the light and how the light changed during the day, because we visited the palace at different times of day, and those sort of spots of light were in a completely different place when we went back.
Yes, they're very, very striking drawings.
Thank you. And then this is one of the paintings which was worked from those drawings and also from memory from being in the space. And there are lots of layers to try and indicate how the light changed over time in that space. And then here is an etching of the another enfilade in the ducal palace. There's a little bit more of the decor. You can get a slight sense from the top of it and from the floors just how ornate it was, but it's the most extraordinary interior. And the Porto enfilade, it's a much less grand building, but it was about the light streaming through the windows and about your eye being led through, and those were the things that really interested me.
That's an extraordinarily intricate what word is composition, that etching on the right there.
That word.
And it certainly shows you just how much is going on visually, how busy the whole place is.
I'm working on that etching to get all the tones and work out the timings for how long that plate went in the acid for each of those tones, and where each of those tones should be etched was I had to really concentrate because it's all done in reverse and in negative as well. So where the highlights are on the image, you paint with a black stop out varnish to stop the acid working on them. So you're working from, although you're thinking about which areas are going to be light, you're painting it with a black varnish, so it's gradually turning the image into a negative.
Yes, but then having seen you in action, I do know how much you love a process, especially etching.
Oh yes, and I love that you can't miss any of those stages out. And it becomes quite meditative that you have to work your way through each of those steps in the etching process. And I am quite impatient really with my work, but etching makes me slow down and work through. You can't hurry it. It will take how long it will take, and you just have to work through it. And it slows me down and makes me really think about what I'm doing.
You must have to set out with an incredibly clear idea of what you want for the end result, because you can't change your mind halfway through and think, actually, no, scrub that, I'll do it another way.
I mean, certainly for the enfilade etchings, I had a working drawing that I did first to scale and then transferred onto the plate. I mean, some of my less representational etchings are, and certainly the monotypes, you can change direction and put another layer on and so on. But no, the etchings like this are planned and worked from a drawing where I've worked out in advance and roughly how many tones that I don't usually have more than about 5 or 6 tones in an etching, because I think any more than that you just can't see. You can't really see the difference, but as long as you've got that rich black, everything else will sing.
What's amazing is that when you move from the etching to the monotypes, there's no sense of the kind of intricate planning involved in the etchings affecting the monotypes? Your monotypes are incredibly free and painterly. How do you manage that? So is it a really relief to get there a bit after some etching?
If I've been working on a series, I mean, recently I've been doing a lot of these very representational etchings. That's been the thing I've been doing over the last sort of couple of months, working up to this exhibition. So now I'm itching to go and splash paint and ink around and do some more of the looser work. But I'll come back round. It's a cycle, and I keep revisiting the different ways of working. And I, having trained as a painter, if I haven't done anything like that, painting and monotypes and the looser work for a while, then I need to go and do that. So it's different sort of intertwining strands to the work.
And then if I can move us on to another type of work you have in the exhibition, and you've shown a lot on social media, which I love, and they kind of encapsulate both of those things. And that's some of the artist books in the exhibition, which are absolutely gorgeous, sometimes very complex structures. They also have tempting but partially hidden interiors. So can you talk us through those a little?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love books. I'm an absolute book lover, bookworm. But I also, with artist books, I love the sculptural element of it, because all the rest of my work is 2D, and then this is an opportunity to make 3D. And I got really involved in them. Last year was when I really started to explore them in more depth. I love the Turkish map fold, the bottom left and right corners are Turkish map fold ones. I like that you can't see the whole thing at the same time, that you need to manipulate them to be able to see each image or each page. So I mean, in the gallery, I would really like people to be able to come pick them up and leaf through them. In these strange times, we probably shouldn't be doing that. But all of the books you can see here are unique. They're one-offs. They're made from collagraphs or photopolymer prints rather. But then I also made a concertina book of the allotment etchings. So this is an edition of 3, which has got 8 original etchings and was a feat of engineering because it has a little slip case to go in as well. So I've really enjoyed that, and it's something I want to develop further once we're back in.
But it does certainly add a wonderful dimension to the 2D work. Just achieving a solo show, especially one of this quality, is always a landmark in an artist development. But this sort of moment can tend to bring you to a bit of a full stop. So I've been wondering about is, do you have any plans for what comes next? Are you going to just sort of take a break like Fallow, or what's going on?
Well, apart from clearing the loft out, I'm going to. I've been making oak gall ink, so I've just started this new strand to my work. In the gallery, there's a scrolling set of photographs of these oak trees, which you can see bottom left here. And then I've been foraging for oak galls, and I got really interested in traditional ink making. So I suppose it's another process. I'm going back to finding comfort in a process, and then working my way through it. So I looked up how to make oak gall ink. And then the rust comes into it as well, because you need rusty metal with vinegar to make the, you need tannic acid, which you soak the oak galls in, water to produce that. And then ferrous sulfate, I think it is, that you get when you soak rusty metal in malt vinegar. And then when you add those two sort of brown liquids together, they go instantly, very satisfyingly black immediately, and then you add a bit of gum arabic to make the ink flow properly, so it will work on a pen. And it's an ancient method that's a traditional ink. It was used to write the Magna Carta, Apparently Jane Austen wrote some of her manuscripts using oak galling ink, and apparently it's a conservator's nightmare because it's highly corrosive, and they to keep these documents and drawings that are done in it safe, because gradually the ink will corrode the paper. But then I quite like that, because that sort of fits with a lot of the things that I'm interested in anyway. And I'd love to think that in 500 years' time, any conservator would be worried about my preserving my drawing. That would be a nice problem to have. But I took the oak gall ink to the park and sat in the park and drew the trees with twigs from those trees and ink made from galls that were found locally. So it's sort of coming full circle, and that's something I'd want to explore more in the future. So I think it is. It's me finding another process that I want to work through. So
well, that's completely fascinating. It all has been. Thank you very much for expanding on that. I personally don't have any further questions, but are you wanting to throw it open to chat now to get other people's questions?
Oh, there's a one that's popped up already. It says, could I repeat the artist's name? It was Carlos San Millan. So maybe I could, hang on, I can type him in. Carlos San Millan. And he's on Instagram and all over the place. And his work is absolutely stunning. So if anyone else has a question, then you can type in the chat.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
If you make your own ink and then you make your own implements,
yes.
Have you ever considered making your own paper?
Yeah, actually I have. That was another thing that I was doing last year.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, no, I have made my own paper. I made it from offcuts from paper I'd used for printmaking. I quite like the idea of making. I wouldn't know where to start from scratch, but I've made paper from reject paper, and the other thing I want to try is making my own charcoal, because I use the twigs for the drawing implements. But I was thinking maybe I could make charcoal out of some of those twigs. I know it's supposed to be willow, but it might be quite interesting to see if you can make oak charcoal, and then the drawing will be made actually, the tree will actually be the drawing. So yeah, yes, thank you.
I would quite like to ask a question which is related to that, really, which is that it occurred to me when you were talking about the oak gall and the oak and things, and that it was absolutely fascinating. But it almost seems, and this occurred to me with the etching too, as if you quite like making things difficult for yourself. And I wondered if there was any truth in that, and if so, why?
Oh dear.
Oh gosh,
Mr. Freud.
I think I deliberately set it. I think it's more that I'm interested in trying those different processes, and certainly with etching. I mean, yes, it is a difficult process, but I think it's worth working through that process, because the quality of line and tone that you get in an etching is something you can't get in a drawing, and the quality of tone that you get in a mezzotint is different from anything you get in an etching. It's that there's a different velvety richness to it. So I think it's about, I mean, yes, it does make it difficult, but I think it's something that's worth working through. And so I hadn't sort of thought of deliberately making it difficult for myself, but I think it's more that I enjoy a process and I enjoy a challenge. And if I think the end result is worth going through that process. I mean, I suppose I started learning lithography recently. So talking about making it difficult for yourself, that's an entirely different process that I had no experience of, and I'd read about lithography and really didn't understand it. So I wanted to go and find out for myself how it worked, and then that's another thing I can see myself becoming addicted to, because it's entirely different from etching, but it's very much related to drawing. So yeah, but it is, again, I think I need another lifetime to learn how to do that properly, really.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear? Yeah, can you all hear?
We have no.
Hello. I'm, as an artist, I'm intrigued really by Eric Ravidis on one end and Ivan Hitchens on the other end. And in your work, I can see actually they're not the same, and that they're like me. Actually, they're not the same, and there's a kind of tension, in a way, in your work. That on one hand, you want that kind of in like the monoprints, I call them controlled immediacy, where he would maybe prime his canvas in white paint and then paint it into the primer. Only within the time scale of the primer would he actually get that painting. And then Eric Ravidis on the other end, who does these beautifully, carefully constructed illustration paintings, which are no less important because I don't use illustration in a bad way. So I see with some of your work, which has very, well, I think it's a very good example of the Ravidis end, I suppose. But having said that, I think this is a very good example of the Hitchens as well, where it's really controlled. It seems very immediate as well, that piece. And then there's a lot of paintings down here, which are very, actually, look, I found it immediate, then I realised there's quite a bit of glazing and reworking.
I think, it is, there's definitely a tension, and I go one way and then another way. So there'll be times when I want to work in a very directly observed, closely observed way, and it does border on illustration, and it worries me sometimes that I'm heading that way. And then if I get too far down that route, then I think, right, well, it's time to go and go to the other end of that scale.
I suppose for me personally, the tension is often to do line and edge, and how one deals with edge. Really.
Yes, because that's the thing. In the monotypes, there is no line, no edge.
Well, there is. Well, there is if you make.
Well, there's line if you draw back into it, but it's not. It's a different kind of line, isn't it? And
I love the line.
Yeah, and the line is fundamentally important, isn't it? So,
and actually, in the allotment things, it's very interesting English misty light in a lot of those images where the 1930s houses.
Can you hear? Can you all hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Where the 1930s houses go out of, they get misted up by the time of day.
And that's quite a Ravilius-y thing, isn't it? The 1930s house, and then I didn't want them to be. Really, yes, it was important that they were there because that's very much part of the atmosphere of that place. But they did need to recede, and often some of the days were misty days, but it was important that they were suggested, but not really. Sorry, thank you. I don't know if I've answered that question, but it's
probably an ongoing debate, I guess. I just wanted to highlight it because I think it's something that I struggle. For me, it's a struggle actually. Personally, in the way I make work, I find it a struggle to want to make an image, but at the same time, the sort of.
Sometimes I feel like I have to. Sometimes if I need to show that I am able to draw, and I feel like that's something I need to say, I can do this, and then other times I think. Actually, look, it doesn't matter whether they know whether I can draw or not. And actually, what I need to do is to say something else, and then and then I get back to, well, I haven't drawn enough recently to do more of that. So it is tension, and I get pulled one way and then another way. And I think that's quite common. And it isn't necessarily what's expected. People want to say, "Oh, that's a Peg Morris," and you can't necessarily pin down what a Peg Morris is because it depends which hat I've got on, which end of that tension I'm at.
Do you think at some point you'll end up going in one direction?
I've never shown any signs of doing that.
But there is quite a strong. I mean, the direction is very much, as you say, you're interested in the surrounding world and observing it, and then developing those images. And that is, it is quite a strong. I think within that you have different.
Yeah, that's what I really. That's been one of the good things about preparing for this show is knowing that it's got to look coherent, and that was something I had to really now be quite strict with myself about. Don't go down that route, don't go off down that route, but I may well go off in an entirely new direction after this. But I don't think that's as unusual as people think. There's so many things. Maybe that's what it is. There's so many things that I want to try. That I want to try all of them, and that comes back to the making it difficult for myself. But I don't want to not have ever tried this way of working or that way of working. I want to try all, apart from possibly performance, which is just not me.
Oh, we've got that scheduled in for next Saturday.
Oh, okay.
There's a remark about Picasso that as soon as he became competent at anything he tried, he put it down and moved on and tried something else, which I think is quite interesting.
Well, I comfort in his huge range of different things. I think, well, if it was good enough for him to try all those different things, then it's got to be good enough for me.
There's another lovely comment. I think it's by Richard Diebenkorn. It was certainly a painter that one of the painters I keep coming back to. And he said that when you go into the studio in the early years, all of the artists that you admire are in there with you, and then over the years, one by one, they leave. And in the end, you leave as well. And I think that's a great quote, because when it's just happening and it's clearly you, that's the stage we all aspire to reaching. And I'd say from what's on the walls there, you've more than reached that point. So I don't think you need concern.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? There's nothing else popping up in the...
Judith Bibby has a question.
Let's unmute you. There we go. Trying to unmute you.
Unmute there. Yeah. No, it's just a quick question about the artist at Pallant House Gallery.
Yes.
Can you just give me his name again, or her name?
His.
And was it Hammershoy?
Yes. The one at Pallant House was Peter Ilstead. Ilstead, yeah. I'm just trying to see whether it's one or two. One. Yeah, Ilsted, Peter Ilstead. And the other one was Wilhelm Hammershoy. And Hammershoy and Ilstead married Hammershoy's sister. So
right.
They obviously worked very closely together, because there's very similar themes in their work.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, there's Kath is waving, so I'm going to, there we go. Oh, hang on. There we go.
I just wanted to know if what teaching you do.
I teach etching and also crafts occasionally at New Studio, although at the moment it's not happening because of COVID, but it will start again. I was a primary teacher for 25 years, and I've escaped that, and now I teach adults rather than children with gravity, which makes it enjoyable. So yeah, I mean, at the moment I haven't got anything lined up, but there will be workshops and courses resuming as soon as we can. I can do one-to-one sessions. So we'll be able to after Christmas now, but yeah. So there's always details on my website if you're interested.
Lovely, thanks.
And where are you doing lithography?
I've been doing lithography at Simon Burder's studio. Do you know, in Carshalton? Yeah. He teaches at Morley College, but studio in Carshalton in Oaks.
Yeah.
And he's an extraordinary teacher. He's very patient and very thorough, and he knows everything you could wish to know about lithography, and he just makes so patient when I'm standing there by the press and I can't remember what to do. But that's also been really good for my teaching because lithography is a new process to me and I need to be told over and over what to do. And then I can understand more when people are trying to learn etching from me, that what comes as second nature to me, because I've been doing it so long, isn't second nature to the people who are coming on my workshops. So there's another reason for making it difficult for myself by going to learn a new thing, but I can then take that experience to when I'm teaching, it's good to be the pupil sometimes and remind yourself what that feels like. Okay.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got a question? You can wave or chat. No?
Well, I think it's just remains for me then just to thank you very much, Peg, for an incredibly interesting talk, and thank you, Alison, for doing a brilliant job of getting Peg to talk a lot, really, about a lot that's a lot of the why as well as the how, I think, and I found it fascinating, and it could go on and on, but thank you very much indeed. And for anybody who hasn't been to the exhibition, they must go. Kate, you might be able to tell me when it finishes.
It finishes next Sunday.
As long as we don't go into tier 3 and
But we would recommend coming as soon as possible. I will open an extra Tuesday this week.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's
every other day until
the exhibition is a brilliant sort of essay in those two ends of from Ravilius to Ivan Hitchens. You've got the really well considered, drawn, made, and the loose and it's an extraordinary exhibition, and it's like a whole big gallery full of work. There's lots and lots of it there. So thank you very much, both of you, for a really interesting talk.
Yeah, I really must say a heartfelt thank you to Alison.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me. It's been extremely interesting.
Oh, and everyone should listen to Alison's blog on the, where's that?
That's on, well, it's on the One Paved Court website, South Bank
blog, and it's on the South Bank Printmakers website. It's been when you first go on it, if you go on it on a tablet or a PC, I think it's actually been succeeded by another colleague's profile of me. Scroll down and then you'll have both.
Unintended consequence.
Yes, yeah, well, that's right. It all comes, but the reason that we thought of asking Alison was because she'd done that blog, and I found when you asked such pertinent questions that made me talk about things that I hadn't thought of before, and it really helped me work out what I was doing, actually. So,
good, I'm pleased.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul, for well, a very insightful introduction and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
And thank you, everybody, for coming along too.
Bye. See you at home.